Julie, and looking forward to discussing with you supply risks and transportation management. Can you first provide us with a background about yourself?
Yes, I have been in transportation, logistics, and supply chain for over 30 years. I started first as a freight forwarder and then gradually made my way over to work in different international settings. Through the work, I've also been able to work from a supplier standpoint in a client's supply chain, doing warehousing, demand planning, as well as supply planning. So I've had a pretty broad experience base over the past 30 years, both on the transportation side and in the supply side and planning side as well.
And can you first define what are supply risks and transportation management?
Sure. I think I have seen, specifically since 2008, a massive change in both road, air, and ocean transportation, particularly as it relates to international transportation. And specifically what I'm talking about is since the 2008 economic crisis, transportation has inherently changed. In our world, when you start talking about ocean freight, for example, concepts like slow steaming have really come on and to be really part of the common day, transportation. So I think what has happened a lot in our world is while there is increasing demand from a client base for accurate transit times to be able to fulfill orders, transportation has not kept up with that. They are increasingly going to hub and spoke in air freight modalities where you don't have direct flights from point A to point B, but rather through second, third, or, different routings. And on the ocean freight side, like I said, slow steaming, as well as other transportation related infrastructure issues have really hindered accurate on-time performance. On top of that, many countries have also implemented increased and enhanced security measures that have really have been evolving over particularly the past decade. And I find that many of our clients are not keeping up with either one of these trends when we start talking about lead time accuracy, start talking about, landed cost analysis. A lot of those concepts are not actually filtering into reality. So what a lot of my clients are finding is that things are arriving a lot slower than they thought and at an increased cost than what they had anticipated.
And can you share some more details about why supply risks and transportation management are important?
It's the backbone from a planning perspective is when I buy something, am I going to get it when I need to? Can I fulfill that order? Can I fulfill the line in a reliable way, in that I also don't have to worry about inventory carrying costs. I mean, everybody wants that perfect vortex of not having inventory as well as fulfilling the client orders or the line orders the way that they need it to. What I think it takes a very nimble and very flexible supply planning process to keep up with all that is happening inside the actual transportation world. And sometimes I feel from a client perspective that many of our clients are not, they don't have nimbleness in the most basic of processes like their lead time tables. How long does it take with all the different influences in there? Did they factor in increased security into the U.S., for example? Did they factor in the costs and the lead time impacts of the ocean freight carrier potentially not coming in time? Did they factor into their lead time tables and the cost the potential time delays at any of the ports in the world that are unable to handle the huge vessels that are now coming in? So I think it boils down to the supply or the demand side really understanding how transportation works on a real time, having that kind of dialogue with their transportation or their supplier base so that they understand the obstacles that are there, so that they aren't, constantly behind the eight ball or running out of stock or supply or whatever.
And can you share with us how this is done effectively?
The most effective groups that I work with are ones that have an ongoing dialogue on a lane by lane basis. And I think it does take a real partnership with the transportation end of your supply chain. And I think that's where someone who is looking to add more reliability from a cost or from a transit time perspective, what they really need to do is develop that sort of relationship with their underlying carriers and freight forwarders, that there is a dialogue and an expectation that there's an ongoing dialogue about those risks. They are changing all the time. Now that, let's just say, inbound into China, we have advanced manifest requirements. What does that mean for the clients that import goods into China? What does that mean from a cost perspective? What does it mean from a transit perspective? What it means from an exporter's perspective from the U.S. is that the client has to get their documents that much earlier to the right authorities and into the steamship line so they can advance and manifest all the cargo. Sounds like a small deal, but I've seen more cargo roll going into China because clients didn't understand. They couldn't wait until the last minute to do the documentation to fulfill the security measures. A small example, but it's one that can have reverberations all the way through your supply chain.
And thanks, Julie. My final question is, do you have any final recommendations?
In my mind, and this is not just because I am a freight forwarder or because I'm in logistics, but it's extremely important that you work with your logistics providers to understand deeply what's going to happen with whatever lane they're working with you on. I like to think of myself as being partnered with my clients in order for all of us to understand, how can we serve you better? And we can't serve you better unless we understand more about you. And I think that's really the message I would like to get across, that we need to work together to develop that knowledge base and that dialogue so that we are able to help the clients, the supply chain groups, avoid unnecessary expenses and unnecessary shortfalls in supply. Just if we work together and we work on a dialogue together ongoing, that I think can help immensely in avoiding any kind of disruptions inside the supply chain.
Well, thanks for sharing today, Julie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate. I appreciate that.